Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us. Today we'll be taking a look at some of humanity's biggest questions. The kind that really make you think, keep you up at night.
Yeah, the big ones.
Exactly. We'll be exploring those through some fascinating excerpts from Humanity's Search for Meaning, Hope, Reality, and Existence.
This should be good.
It really is a fascinating read. And get ready, because we're going deep on the profound questions humans have been asking for, well, forever. Really questions about why we exist, what our purpose is, and what might be waiting for us after this life is over.
And what's so interesting about this is how humans, we're not content with just figuring out the how of things, like how the universe works.
Mechanics of it all.
Yeah, exactly. We're driven to uncover the why behind our existence.
I see what you mean. Like science can explain the Big Bang or evolution, but it doesn't really provide that satisfying answer to the question of, well, what's the point of it all?
Right. It's like we need that last page of the cosmic story.
The one that reveals what it all means.
Exactly. And our source material really digs into this, suggesting that people actually search for different kinds of meaning.
Different kinds. So it's not just one big meaning of life.
Not necessarily, no. The book talks about this idea of seeking meaning and purpose.
Okay, so like feeling like our lives have a direction, that they're significant.
Exactly. But we also crave meaning through connection.
Connection, like belonging to something bigger than ourselves.
Right, whether it's family or community or even a shared cause.
That makes sense. We're social creatures after all.
We are. And then there's meaning through transcendence.
That one feels a bit more, I don't know, abstract.
It is, a little. It's like, think about the desire to go beyond those limitations of our physical existence.
To connect with something bigger.
Yes, something timeless. Through art or nature or spiritual experiences.
Like a yearning for something that outlasts our own individual lives.
That's a great way to put it.
So we have this deep desire for meaning, this need to feel like our lives matter, but then there's also that awareness that we're, well, mortal.
That we won't be here forever.
Yeah. So the question is, how do we reconcile those two seemingly opposing forces? How can we find meaning when we know our time is limited?
This is where it gets really fascinating. The book actually suggests that this awareness that we're going to die, that it actually fuels a lot of human behavior.
Really? I'm curious to hear more about that.
Well, for example, someone who was raised in a faith that emphasizes a divine purpose, every choice they make, it might be measured against a creator's will.
Like their actions have to align with some sort of cosmic rule book.
Exactly. And their morality, their worldview, might be completely intertwined with this idea of a creator's plan.
I can see that. But wouldn't that make them feel, I don't know, kind of trapped by fate? Like if everything's already decided, does it limit their sense of free will?
It's a great point. And the book does explore this tension, this back and forth between destiny and free will. But it suggests that even with that framework of divine purpose, individuals, they still have the capacity to make choices, to carve their own paths,
So it's not necessarily a predetermined script, but more like finding meaning within a larger narrative.
I like that, finding meaning within a larger narrative.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about people who, they might grapple with doubt or have even lost their faith? What happens to their search for meaning when they question those beliefs?
Well, that's when things can get tricky. Questioning those deeply held beliefs, it can lead to, some serious existential angst.
Angst. Like anxiety about their place in the world.
Exactly. They might struggle with, whether their actions even have lasting value if there's no grand plan, no ultimate purpose.
And that can be a very difficult, but also potentially really important part of a person's journey, wouldn't you say? As they kind of redefine what their own purpose is.
Absolutely, it is. And it makes you think, about how this whole idea of a creator's purpose or the lack of one, how does it affect our own personal choices and how we see ourselves in the world?
It's a question worth thinking about. And it gets even more complex, I think, when we start thinking about, our own mortality.
The fact that we don't live forever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're the only species, as far as we know, that understands its own inevitable end.
And that can be both unsettling, but also strangely motivating, don't you think?
So on one hand, we have this longing for meaning, for our lives to matter, but then we're constantly reminded of our limited time. How do we balance those two things?
That's the paradox, isn't it? And what's fascinating is that this knowledge that we're going to die someday, that it actually drives so much of human behavior.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, think about it. A terminally ill patient might find comfort in believing in an afterlife, that their consciousness will continue in some form.
That makes sense.
Right, and it can have such a huge impact on how they make decisions about their end-of-life care and even how they interact with loved ones.
I see what you mean. It's like finding a sense of peace, of continuity, even when faced with, well, the ultimate unknown.
Exactly. And even beyond religious beliefs, this knowledge that our time is limited, it can fuel this desire to leave a legacy behind.
A legacy?
Yeah. Think about that drive to have children or to create art that will live on after us or to do something, make a lasting contribution to society.
Like trying to almost like cheat death in a way.
Yeah.
To leave some part of ourselves behind.
Exactly. It speaks volumes about our need to find meaning beyond our own existence. But that brings up another really interesting question, How do these beliefs in the afterlife, how do they actually influence our sense of morality? That's something we're going to delve into next.
It's fascinating to think about how our beliefs about what happens, well, if anything happens after we die, could actually shape our actions while we're still here.
Yeah.
Do concepts like heaven and hell actually motivate us to, be better people?
It's interesting. They definitely can create a strong framework for ethical behavior, that's for sure. The promise of reward or punishment in the afterlife, it's an idea that resonates with a lot of people.
I can see that. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, if someone really believes they're going to be held accountable for their actions, judged in some cosmic courtroom, would it affect how they act, even when they think they can get away with something here on Earth?
No, absolutely. The book really dives into this idea that this belief in a divine judgment, it can act as a powerful deterrent, to keep people from doing bad things. It can influence so many things, everything from personal relationships to how people conduct business, even their political views.
Wow. It really makes you think. I'm curious, for those listening, does this idea of an afterlife with either rewards or punishments, does it have any impact on your own choices? It's amazing how these beliefs, even if we're not always consciously aware of them, can shape our sense of right and wrong.
It really is. But what about people who don't believe in any of that? People who don't subscribe to these traditional ideas of an afterlife.
Right. So if someone believes that this life is all we get, does that mean they're just focused on, I don't know, like maximizing pleasure and avoiding pain, just living for the moment?
Not necessarily, no. While some people might prioritize those things, making the most of their experiences in this life, what's really interesting is that the book points out how many people, even without a belief in an afterlife, still find a sense of meaning in contributing to something larger than themselves.
Like leaving a positive mark on the world.
Exactly. It could be through their work, their relationships, their involvement in their community, whatever it might be. It's this drive to create something that outlasts them, to leave things a little bit better than they found them.
So it's not just about fear of punishment or hope for reward in some other realm. There's something deeper going on.
Absolutely. It suggests that this urge to make a difference, it runs much deeper than that. And it actually brings us to another really important part of this whole search for meaning, our limitations as humans.
Limitation.
Yeah, the fact that we're finite beings. We age, we get sick, and eventually, we die.
That's kind of a heavy thought, isn't it?
It is. And it makes you wonder, how do we cope with that knowledge while still finding a sense of purpose and meaning in our lives?
It's like this constant tension between wanting our lives to matter and knowing that our time is limited.
That's the struggle. And the book suggests that being aware of our limitations, it actually plays a huge role in how we seek meaning.
So it's like a driving force.
In a way, yes. It pushes us towards connection, towards creating something that will live on after we're gone.
So our awareness of death actually motivates us to find meaning in relationships, experiences, things that will outlast our own individual existence.
That's the idea. Think about it. As people get older, they often shift their focus towards things like family and community and their legacy. They're looking for deeper meaning and connections and contributions that will endure even after they're gone. It's a very natural human response to this reality that our time here is finite.
It's not just about aging either.
Yeah.
I mean, look at all the advancements we're making in medicine and technology, all aimed at extending our lifespans. This almost like primal urge to push past those biological limits.
It's really fascinating, isn't it? It points to this deep desire for transcendence, for something that goes beyond those earthly constraints.
And this all ties into another really essential part of the search for meaning, doesn't it? Hope.
Hope, exactly. Hope for a future that goes beyond our individual experience.
Hope is such a powerful emotion. It fuels our dreams, keeps us going when things are tough, motivates us to take action.
And the book really highlights this, how important hope is in our search for meaning. It gives us resilience, purpose, the drive to keep striving for something better, even in the face of all kinds of challenges.
But isn't there a danger in holding on to hope, too tightly? What if our hope isn't really grounded in reality?
That's when things can get a little tricky. While hope can be an incredible force for good, the book is careful to point out the potential downsides of unrealistic hope.
So, like a double-edged sword.
Exactly. It can push us to achieve amazing things, but it can also lead to denial and disappointment, if it's not rooted in reality.
Like we can get so focused on that feeling of hope that we miss what's actually happening around us.
The book argues that the key is to find that balance between hope and reality. It's not about ignoring the challenges or pretending everything is perfect. It's about acknowledging those things while still holding on to hope for a brighter future.
So like a realistic kind of optimism.
Yes, exactly. It's about finding that middle ground where hope motivates us to take action, not to avoid it. The book gives a great example to illustrate this.
Oh, I like examples. What is it?
Imagine someone who is living with a chronic illness, right? They can accept their condition, they can seek treatment, they can make changes to their lifestyle, and they can still have hope for a better quality of life. They're not in denial about their situation, but they're not letting it crush their spirit either.
It's like finding that strength to keep going, to keep moving forward, even when things are hard.
Exactly. And this idea applies to so much more than just personal health challenges,
So how else does this play out?
Well, think about a community that's dealing with poverty. They can recognize the systemic problems and all the struggles that people are going through, but they can also work toward finding solutions, creating opportunities, implementing programs. They can be driven by that hope for a better future.
So hope can really be a powerful force for change, both individually and on a larger scale. It's not just a feeling. It can actually inspire real action.
That's a really important point. The book highlights how hope has been behind so many social movements throughout history. The fight for civil rights, the push for equality, the environmental movement.
It's amazing to think about how hope has shaped the course of history.
It really has. But remember, we also talked about how hope can have a downside. So when does hope become a problem? Well, the book warns against this idea of blind hope.
Blind hope.
The kind that makes us ignore warning signs or keeps us from making tough decisions. When hope becomes an excuse to avoid taking action, to avoid the hard work that's needed to create change.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So it's like the hope is there, but it's not leading to any real results.
Exactly. Think about someone who is struggling with addiction. They might hold on to hope that they can overcome it on their own without getting help. And while that hope is understandable, it could actually prevent them from taking the steps they need to recover.
So hope can actually become a form of denial if it's not grounded in reality.
Yes, exactly. And the book emphasizes how important it is to be self-aware, to really be honest with ourselves about whether our hope is actually motivating us to do something positive, or if it's just a way to shield ourselves from facing difficult truths.
It's like checking in with ourselves, asking, is this hope helping me move forward or is it holding me back?
Exactly. Think about a time when hope inspired you to do something good, something positive. What was it that motivated you? What were the results? Now think about a time when hope might have actually prevented you from doing something. Maybe it kept you from facing a challenge or taking a risk.
That's a great exercise. It makes you really think about your own motivations. So much of what we've talked about today comes down to finding that balance, that delicate balance between hope and reality.
It really does. It's a balancing act we all have to figure out, finding that sweet spot where hope can empower us without blinding us. And that's something we're going to explore even further when we come back. How do we find that balance? How do we make sure that our hope leads to positive action rather than just wishful thinking?
So we've been talking about this idea of hope and how it can be such a powerful force in our search for meaning. But we also touched on how, hope can have a bit of a dark side, especially when it's not grounded in reality. So how do we walk that line? How do we find that balance between hope and, well, the challenges that life throws our way?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the book actually offers some really insightful perspectives on this. It's not about, becoming a pessimist or just ignoring the hard stuff.
Right, not pretending everything's sunshine and rainbows.
Exactly. It's more about recognizing those challenges, even the suffering, and at the same time, holding on to hope for a future that's better.
So it's kind of like a realistic optimism, not denying the tough stuff, but still believing that things can get better.
Yes. It's about finding that middle ground, that sweet spot where hope actually fuels action instead of denial. The book actually gives this really powerful example.
Oh, I love a good example. Lay it on me.
Okay, so picture someone who's living with a chronic illness. They can accept their condition, they can seek treatment, they can make changes to their lifestyle, all while still hoping for a better quality of life. They're not pretending their illness doesn't exist, but they're also not letting it define them.
It's like they're finding that inner strength, that resilience to keep moving forward, even when things are really tough.
Exactly. And, this applies to so much more than just personal health issues.
Oh, I can see that. So what other situations would this apply to?
Well, think about a community struggling with poverty, for example. They can acknowledge the systemic issues, the struggles that people face every day, but they can also work towards solutions, implementing programs, creating opportunities. They can be guided by this hope that a better future for their community is possible.
So hope can be a real catalyst for positive change, both for individuals and for entire communities. It's not just some passive emotion. It can actually drive real action.
Exactly. And the book actually points out how hope has been the driving force behind so many social movements historically. The fight for civil rights, for equality, for environmental protection.
It's incredible to think about how hope has literally changed the course of history. But I know we also talked about how hope can sometimes have a negative side. So when does hope become a problem?
Well, the book cautions against something called blind hope.
Blind hope, what does that mean?
It's that kind of hope that blinds us to red flags or keeps us from making those tough choices we sometimes need to make. It's when hope becomes an excuse to avoid action, to avoid the hard work that's needed to actually create real change. Think about someone who's battling addiction and they're clinging to this hope that they can beat it on their own without any help. While that hope is definitely understandable, it might actually stop them from taking the steps they need to recover.
So it's almost like hope can become a form of denial if it's not rooted in reality. We can get so caught up in the feeling of hope that we lose sight of what really needs to be done.
That's the danger, yes. And the book really stresses the importance of being self-aware. We need to be honest with ourselves about whether our hope is actually pushing us to do something positive or if it's just a way to avoid uncomfortable truths.
That's a great point. It's almost like we need to do a check-in with ourselves and ask, is this hope helping me move forward or is it holding me back?
Exactly. It's all about asking those tough questions.
So much of what we've discussed today boils down to finding that balance, that delicate balance between hope and reality.
It really does. It's this balancing act that we're all constantly navigating. We need hope to inspire us, to motivate us, but we also need to be grounded in reality to guide us and make sure our efforts are actually making a difference.
Wow. This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive into what it means to be human and our never-ending quest for meaning. For all of you listening out there, the big takeaway here is this. Those questions we ask about our existence, our purpose, what happens after we die, those aren't just some abstract philosophical ideas. They're deeply personal. They shape our values, our choices, how we see the world around us.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And this whole idea of balancing hope and reality, it's a dance we're all doing. We need hope to fuel our dreams, to inspire us to make a difference. But we also need a good dose of reality to keep us grounded and make sure those efforts are actually effective. And on that note, we're going to leave you with a final thought to ponder. If you had the chance to ask the Creator just one question, what would it be? Think about that. Thanks for joining us on this amazing journey of exploration. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, keep diving deep.
This is DigitView.